So tonight is the birthday and the passing of the second leader of Chabad, known as the Mittler Rebbe. His name was Dover, one of the people my son Dover is named after. There is a number of the holy leaders of Chabad that have the name Dover in various forms, so he's named after a few of them, including the Mittler Rebbe. Every time when I tell him it's someone's birthday, he always says, it's my birthday, mine. So tonight I said, oh, it's the birthday of the Mittler Rebbe. He says, mine. I'm like, actually, you're right. You're named after him. So yeah, Dover's birthday. We'll call it your birthday. So it's the birthday and the passing of the second Rebbe, the second leader of Chabad, whose name was, as we're saying, Dover. It's considered super special to be born and pass away the same day, like Moses did, Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was born on the 7th of Adar, and he passed away 120 years later on the 7th of Adar. And it expresses this idea of absolute completion. Now, obviously, every tzaddik, every very, very holy Jew is absolutely complete. But sometimes the completion is so intense, it comes into the very physical reality. So when in the physical reality, we see that he was born and passed away on the same day, he did not have such a long life, not like Moses. He was born in 1773, passed away in 1827. So he did not live that many years, but they were very, very, very complete. He was the eldest son of the previous Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And he was the first one to actually settle in Lubavitch. When you think of Chabad, Lubavitch, it's called Chabad as an acronym for the approach of this Hasidic group. And it's called Lubavitch, if you heard the name, Lubavitcher Rebbe, Lubavitchers, because this was the town that was the center of the movement for over 100 years. And the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, he was one that settled in Lubavitch and made it the center where, again, it became for 100 plus years. A little town in White Russia, but became a place of tremendous, tremendous, tremendous holiness. He also actually was the first one in those days. That's when the government started regulating they had to take on last names. And he took on the name. They wasn't necessarily like familial. Like his father took on the name, the Alter Rebbe, took on the name Baruchovich, because his father's name was Baruch. And the Mittler Rebbe, I guess he had taken on the last name also. He took on the last name Shneuri, because his father was Shneur Zalman. And from Shneuri, it evolved to become Schneerson, the son of Shneur, which is the family name of the family of the Rebbe, of course, until today. But I'm not giving you a history class. There's lots to say, and I could spend a long time talking about his greatness and his accomplishments and his leadership, and I'm not going to do any of that. Every Rebbe has their thing, their forte, the spiritual energy of God they represent. He represented the Bina of God, Bina meaning understanding, because he was like the intellect of Chassidus. He was very, very holy. He was probably, in a sense, considered the overtly most holy of all the Rebbeim, of all the leaders of the Chabad dynasty, and very, very, very much the intellect, the thought of Chassidus. We say his lifeblood was Chassidus. His son-in-law, the Tzemach Tzedek, who became Rebbe after him, said that if you cut him, most people bleed blood. He would bleed Chassidus. His whole life, his whole energy was Chassidus, as if literally, this is his blood. His Chassidus was very different from his father's. His father, of course, was the Alter Rebbe. He started the Chabad Hasidic movement. But the Mittler Rebbe's Chassidus was much longer, much more developed, honestly, much deeper. He was going the next step, and his thoughts were much deeper than his father's. His discourses would go on for hours and hours. He was a very prolific writer of Hasidic discourses. He literally, uniquely, he's the only Rebbe that ever did this in the Chabad dynasty. He would write a mimer, which means a Hasidic discourse, for individuals. This is for you. This is for you. Or this is for this group. Or this is for this group. Actually, it's very rare that he has a Hasidic discourse for everyone, because he was so focused on each individual and literally is writing a discourse. A discourse means a new revelation of godly energy, a new revelation of God thought for the individual. He had very unique intellectual abilities, tremendous power of concentration and contemplation. In other words, he's sort of combining two very opposite directions. On one hand, I said he was so holy, considered the holiest, like completely transcending this world. He was just pure intellect, purely in the world of the thoughts of Chassidus. He would deliver a discourse for hours and hours and hours. I could try to learn one. I'm talking about like 100 pages, 100 plus pages. And I'm like, people actually listen to this in one shot, over 100 pages of deep, deep, deep concepts. The truth is, most people couldn't follow it. Most people are not capable of hearing hours and hours and hours and maintaining in their mind the flow of hours and hours of deep, deep, deep thoughts. And actually, they would sort of take turns listening because they couldn't possibly follow it and have that concentration for so many hours. So he was beyond, wholly beyond, intellect beyond. At the same time, he was so closely connected to each individual follower, to each individual chassid, that he gave them personal guidance, that he literally wrote a chassidic discourse to guide this person in his specific path in serving God. So these are like, whoa, you're so beyond, and you're connecting to every individual and literally speaking hours of a discourse for one person? But the truth is, as Chassidus looks at it, these two ideas are very interrelated. Because specifically when someone is spiritually so high, so transcendent, so beyond, they can go all the way down. If you're all the way high, you can go all the way down to relate to the lowest levels. Like for the weakest student, you want the best teacher. This was the Mittler Rebbe, the most holy, 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 and going all the way down. So that's just a little background. As I said, I know so many stories. I'm not going to say them. I know a nice amount of history. I'm not going to share it. I thought, because I wanted this to be something that, we're going to benefit from in a way that's relevant to us, as we understand relevant. So I thought it would be an appropriate night to focus on Chassidus. This is what he's about. This is his lifeblood. He's bleeding Chassidus. So if it's his night, if it's his energy, I want to focus on Chassidus. As we've learned in the past, birthdays and even more the passing of a very holy Jew are very relevant to us. A birthday, your energy is very powerful, right? That's why we always try to remember people's Jewish birthdays, and that's why many people have the custom of giving blessings on their birthday, because birthdays are days when our powers are very high. You say Mazel Tov. A mazel is actually a real concept. It's a spiritual energy. And your mazel is very high on your birthday. Well, not only is his birthday, but it's also the day of his passing. Cool feat. Now, the day of your passing, if you're a holy person, all that you've accomplished your entire life is shining in the world and creates salvation. And every year, he passed away a number of years ago, right? We're talking about in the 1880s. So from the 1880s to now, well, that's the long time. It doesn't get stale. Every year it gets higher. Every year, everything he accomplished in his 54 some years gets stronger, gets stronger, gets stronger, and literally creates salvation. So I wanted to connect to his energy, that we should be the recipients of his energy, both the energy of his birthday, his heightened mazel powers, and combined with the energy of his passing, when everything he accomplished is creating salvation. We want salvation. I want salvation. I'm sure all of us want salvation for whatever, personally or globally, or what's going on in Israel, what's going on in America. Lots and lots of layers of salvation we're looking for. So I want to connect his energy to really be able to draw that down for ourselves. So of course we have learned Chassidus. At one point, quite a number of years ago, we went through the entire first section of the Tanya, 53 chapters, which was the writings of his father. We also at one point, more recently, but it was still a few years ago, we learned through several chapters in the section on repentance in the Tanya, also written by his father. And of course, many, many things we discuss in this class are Chassidus. So I think it's a really appropriate night to cling, to focus, to think about Chassidus, to try to open ourselves up to the energy of the Mittler Rebbe, to absorb this heightened mazel, to absorb the salvation that's being offered for this period of time. So I thought that we could focus on two things. One thing is I thought we could focus on some ideas in Chassidus that we have definitely learned and discussed over the years, and people could share how the ideas affect them, how they understand them, how they integrate them. But I think even before that, I would like to focus on some ideas of the Mittler Rebbe himself, some things he's taught us, because I thought that's probably the most direct way to connect to him is through his teachings. So I want to share some of his teachings. I tried to select some that I thought we could think about and relate to, and maybe people could talk on how they see an application. All right, so we're ready because we want this energy. So one teaching of the Mittler Rebbe, of the Dovber, the Mittler Rebbe, whose birthday and yahrzeit is going on right now up there. I'm sure in heaven there's this massive gathering, and he's talking and talking and talking Torah all 25 hours straight. So one very famous teaching of his, and you might have heard it without knowing it's from him, is that when two Jews speak together, when they speak together in learning, when they speak together to encourage each other, to help each other, you have two godly souls against one animal soul. Has anyone here ever heard of this concept? If you have, you can raise your hand. I don't see anyone's hands raised. Okay, so let me explain the concept. What he's saying is, like a lot of times, some people, when they have a problem, they want to share it. Some people, they have a problem, they don't want to share it. And in a sense, it's like, is it good to talk? Is it not good to talk? Should we share? Well, it depends what you mean by sharing. If share means blabbing to every person you meet all the stuff going on in your life, that might not be appropriate and it might not be helpful. But keeping it all buried in your heart is also not appropriate and helpful. And it's actually good to talk to another Jew, specifically, of course, about problems that have to do with something in the spiritual arena, which a lot of our problems do, because almost everything has to do with God in the end of the day. Why? I don't want to, especially talking about something interpersonal, I don't want to gossip, I don't want to, I don't want to emote, or if I talk, I'm giving it more energy. Maybe it's better just to pretend it doesn't exist and ignore it. Now, of course, those things have a place as well. But the Mittler Rebbe says, when two Jews talk together, this is what's happening spiritually. Every Jew has a godly soul and an animal soul. Every single Jew. The godly soul wants God. The godly soul, all of its existence is God. And the animal soul is pulling us in the other direction. So normally inside of ourselves, we have a godly soul pulling us in one direction, and an animal soul pulling us in the other direction, and we're sort of, have to go through this struggle and overcome. The Mittler Rebbe says, if two Jews are together, we've shifted the balance of powers. Because if two Jews are together, you have two godly souls overcoming one animal soul. It's 2 against 1. That's very good odds. So if you have a problem or an issue or a worry or something that's bothering you or something you're striving or working with or challenged with, and you speak to another Jew, I'm saying specifically a Jew because only a Jew has a godly soul, you've got 2 godly souls, and they're going to attack one animal soul 2 over 1. It's very good odds. You're going to succeed. Now, of course, we could say, that's what he says. Now, of course, we could say, well, what do you mean? If it's 2 Jews, you do have 2 godly souls, but you also have 2 animal souls. So it's not 2 against 1, it's 2 on 2. So what is it helping me? But the idea is, animal souls are very selfish. My animal soul wants to mess me up. Your animal soul wants to mess you up. But my animal soul isn't going to be bothered with you, and your animal soul isn't going to be bothered with me. But all godly souls want God. So all godly souls unite in this pursuit of God, in this relationship to God. So when 2 Jews are together, literally, the godly souls unite, but the animal souls do not unite. So that's why we have the power of 2 godly souls over 1 animal soul. This is his teaching. Now, of course, it applies not only with 2 people, but obviously sometimes you have groups. We have in the world of Chassidus the concept of a Fabranium, which means a gathering, which is the same idea, but with more people. or when you're talking and you're sharing and you're listening and you're trying to support people and help people, you've got all these godly souls that are gathered together and they're all united. And all of our animal souls are just selfishly, pulling each one of us individually down. So there's a lot of power to help. It says by a gathering of 10 Jews, that's the traditional number for a quorum, for a minyan, is 10 Jews. If you have any 10 Jews gathered, 10 women, 10 men, 10 teenagers, if you have any 10 Jews gathered, it says an angel would not be able to pass through that gathering because it would be consumed by the fire. The fire of those 10 souls all together is so intense it would burn up an angel. I don't know if virtually it works the same way, but possibly it does. And actually, Hashgacha Pratis, the divine providence, there are exactly 10 of us here now. So if all of our souls are able to bond over this, why should space be a barrier to a soul? We've got 10 souls. That's just tremendous power. So that is a teaching of the Mitzvah Rebbe. That's a thought of his. It's a Torah of his. Want to connect his Torahs, to connect his energy, to get all that heightened mazel and all that salvation. Anyone have thoughts on this idea? Anyone has seen that they are helped when they speak to someone or not, or depending on who you're talking to? Any thoughts on this? Anyone has seen this sense of like when I'm with someone else, I do feel I have a stronger power and I can make better choices?
Hi, everyone. So first of all, I never heard this before, so it's very interesting to learn something new. I am kind of drawn into different directions, right? Because yes, it's very good to talk to someone, but at the same time, could be it's another Jew, but it could be what is it? Ayan Hara or like
Ayin Hara?
Ayan Hara, or could start some gossiping, right? If you share and the other person might share further out, and it would be dangerous. Then it will create danger, negative evil. So, like, the idea sounds great, but it's like where's this line between something great and something that the same conversation of two people can create evil?
I totally hear you. I totally hear you. And I think you're totally right. And I think I think what you're saying is 100% correct. Like everything, it's a power. And actually, I never thought of it this way, but as you're saying it, the more something has power, there's always that pendulum concept. So it actually makes sense to me what you're saying because this is so powerful. Meaning, if something has a lot of power in one direction, swing it in the other way, it's also going to have a lot of power. So in ourselves, things that are very strongly good are probably our greatest weaknesses as well. Or let's say your kids, their greatest weaknesses turned around could be their greatest strengths. So I think you're right. And I think actually, as I'm saying, it's probably embedded in the concept. And what Chava is saying is true, 100% true. And as I'm saying, maybe that's why it's so true, because of the power here. And I think the way to have a synergy between these two ideas is to choose wisely who you're talking to. Meaning the Mittler Rebbe is saying, 2 Jews, 2 godly souls over 1 animal soul. Chav is saying, and ayin hara, and gossip, and then, or even not gossip, and that people not worrying about the problem of evil of gossip, but maybe worrying about sharing your story and maybe who they're going to share it with. Maybe you don't want your what you personally shared getting out there. So I think this goes back to every Jew has a godly soul, and at the same time, choose wisely which godly soul you want to aid yours. That's how I think I would take your comment. I totally hear the comment, and I'm saying by the same token, if someone is, let's say, if someone has a problem, an issue, and they talk deeply to one person for 3 hours about it, and then they jump and speak to another person for 3 hours, and then they jump and speak to another person for 3 hours. Well, they're also not being helped, even though they have all these godly souls, but they're not putting themselves in a space to be helped because they're not, they're just jumping from person to person to talk, to talk, to talk, to talk, not to process, not to work. So you're 100% right. Obviously, there's caveats on the concept, but that doesn't take away the power of it, which is when you do it right, when you do it properly, when you pick wisely, when you're speaking with someone and really want this person to help you with whatever issue you're going through, know there's a tremendous spiritual power here beyond that you picked a good person and a wise person and an understanding person and a safe person. You picked a person that's a Jew. You picked a person with a godly soul. And their godly soul and your godly soul are going to join forces. So you can definitely, with these joint forces, overcome the animal.
I am like more with Hava, but not exactly. It's a little different for me. I feel for myself, it's better not to talk with people about things. I feel like it's easier for me to handle, let's say, if there is a problem or something, if I don't tell people.
Because you feel, because you gotten burnt in the past, or because if you do it, you just end up emoting it or obsessing on it or putting too much energy into it?
Yeah, something with the energy. It goes into the wrong direction. I feel like
it just pulls you down and makes it bigger and bigger, and you do better just moving on and not.
Yeah. I feel like it's better for me to keep it to myself.
I hear that. I mean, I think people should know themselves. What I would say is sometimes when you know that about yourself, and I totally understand that because a lot of people do that without realizing it, so it's wise to realize it, is to say, okay, this is a tool. I know that if I start talking, I'm just going to put myself in a bad space. I don't want to just talk. But if I see that this is a problem, this is a situation, this is an area that I'm not succeeding in overcoming by my normal techniques, moving on and not obsessing over it and not thinking it and not energizing it, all of which are very good ideas. But it's not working here because it's too big, it's gripping me too much, it's too much of a problem. I'd like to try this, but I want to be very solution oriented when I talk to someone. I don't want to get into the drama. I don't want to get into the emotion. I don't want to pull myself into a negative space. I just want to give a very bare bones skeletal description to really just focus on solutions. Because then I want to benefit from that other soul, but I don't want to put in danger myself. I think that's how I would use it. But definitely, if you're saying I have other techniques and they work for me, good. You know yourself. You know your strengths. You know your weaknesses. You know what works. But sometimes, if your regular techniques aren't working, this could be worth trying with these boundaries. With these
boundaries. And sometimes I do try that. Yeah. You know what helps? A lot of times listening to lectures, to smart lectures on the topics that I'm interested in.
Good. That's great. It's just picking you up. You don't have to go into the dirt. You just get lifted up beyond it.
Yeah. Torah Anytime has a lot of topics, a lot of lectures, and very often I find something
that's relevant.
Relevant.
Great. That's great. That's wonderful. That's Torah. Torah's picking you up.
Yeah.
Very powerful. We're stuck in the mud. Torah picks us up past ourselves. So I'm glad. That's a beautiful way to deal with it. Beautiful. The Mittler Rebbe was brilliant beyond, and his focus was Chassidus. Chassidus meaning the inner dimension of Torah, the mystical dimension of Torah. So, as I said, the Mittler Rebbe, he would teach deep Hasidic ideas for hours. I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about for 10, 12, 15 hours at a time. He's just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, but not talking and rattling off simple ideas. Very, very, very deep ideas. And his followers had to really stretch themselves to understand and to hold their thoughts for these 10, 12, 15 hours. So you can understand his teachings were very, very deep, very involved, very deep. So he had a very famous, disciple, a very famous follower named Rabbi Hillel Parcher. And Rabbi Hillel Parcher asked him, The question, he didn't say a statement, he said it was a question. Should I give over these teachings in a place where I know the people don't understand a thing? Woo, go right over their heads. Meaning, the Mitzvah Rebbe of Dov Ber, he encouraged, and not just encouraged, he instructed his followers. You came to Lubavitch, you absorbed all my teachings. On your way back, every village, every shtetl, every place you pass, you have to give over my teachings. It's not just, I got it. I have to share it. I have to teach all the people that aren't coming to Lubavitch. I have to share the Torah. I have to share the wealth. So this very great follower of his was saying, what if I know that people aren't going to understand one word? I mean, of course I could teach them Torah, but your Torah, these very, very deep concepts in Chassidus, am I supposed to do that? And the Mitzvah Rebbe said, well, what do you think the Mitzvah Rebbe said? Yes, teach them teach them Chassidus, teach them the very, very deep Torah they will definitely not understand, or teach them Torah. But find some Torah they'll understand and teach them something they'll understand. Or teach them what they totally won't understand. Any thoughts? What do you think he said? He said, teach them the Chassidus that they intellectually cannot possibly understand. They don't have any background. This is very deep. They don't understand a word of what you're saying. You could be talking Chinese for the same price because the soul understands. Teach them. They don't understand a word because their soul understands. How do you think about that? How can you apply that? I think it's just so powerful and relevant. This idea that sometimes, we're all intellectuals or quasi or wannabe or maybe pseudo-intellectuals. We understand, we don't understand, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, we judge everything, we mark everything, we grade it, it was good, it wasn't good, I got it, I was inspired, I wasn't inspired. And the Mitzvah Rebbe is saying, guys, your soul understands. You don't understand. Your soul understands. Your soul is hearing everything. Everything that makes sense to you. Everything that doesn't make sense to you. Any drop of Torah you have ever been exposed to, your soul hears every word. Your soul gets it. Your soul is inspired. Your soul is flying. Your soul is fed. The only thing that feeds a soul is Torah. Your soul is going to change you. I don't know if anyone's had this experience, so maybe I'm sketching out experience nobody's had, of being exposed to Torah, so to speak, being at a lecture, not understanding a word, listening to a class, not understanding a word, opening up a holy book, not understanding a word, but then afterwards, you did things differently. And you saw, if you connected the dots, that you were affected. But you didn't understand a word. But you were affected because your soul heard. I think in general, it's this amazing concept of a lot of how we look at ourselves and how we look at what we go through in life and how we look at Torah. Your soul is hearing every word. Your soul is, please stay longer. I don't understand a thing. This is so boring. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't relate to this at all. And your soul is like, please, please, please stay. I'm taking it all in. Oh, it's food. Oh, please, you're feeding me these moments. Please stay. Be bored, but stay. Be confused, but stay. Be disinterested, but stay. Because your soul is here. I never had such an experience where they learned and didn't understand it all, but then later they saw they were different. They made more godly choices without knowing why. I think it's not such an uncommon experience. Because a lot of times people learn and don't get it. Or people learn and I was bored. Oh, I didn't understand. Oh, it was confusing. I didn't follow. But then you change. Why am I changing? I'm not inspired. I'm not even interested. Your soul is hearing. Your soul is hearing. Your soul is affecting you. Your soul is getting it.
I can share a couple things. You probably remember when I met with you first time.
Of course I remember.
I told you, don't even try to teach me Tanya.
Mm-hmm. I do remember that. I'm everyone's everything.
Yeah.
Not everyone's, but some people. So some things I remember, yes.
what I said, that then I heard it. I don't understand the word. It makes me feel so bad about myself. I just like don't even go that direction. And you being who you are, very smart person, you said, of course, well, there's plenty to learn. We have to learn Torah and Tanya. And then now I listen to Tanya classes, and some classes I understand, and some classes still very difficult for me. And yeah, and some classes actually I like a lot, and I feel like they feed me. So that's one of the examples, and I have quite a few of those.
Well, if Chava has quite a few, then that means she's open enough to keep putting herself in uncomfortable places. To say, I don't understand this, I don't like this, but I'll put myself in that place again, and I'll put myself in that place again. Maybe this time it'll work. Maybe this time it'll make some sense. Maybe this time it'll click. And then you keep putting yourself there, and then even your mind, even your animal nature also starts getting on board. But I think, honestly, this concept, I feel, as a teacher of Torah, I think not exactly this idea, but sort of similar. Like someone can walk into a class, stay a few minutes, or virtually walk in and walk out, or physically, if there's physical classes, walk in and walk out. And like, what did they get? I guess they weren't interested. I guess, they didn't relate. And I'm like, whatever they heard, that is what they were supposed to hear. That is what their soul was supposed to hear. Because as we're sitting there, whatever our mind is processing, whatever we emotionally are processing, our soul is absorbed. Our soul is getting affected. Our soul is getting energized. And I love Chava's example, and I'm happy she shared it. There's hope. You can be, no, this doesn't work for me. So learn it anyway, and then see what happens. Anyone else? Anyone else want to comment on that one? Okay. Another idea of the Mitzvah Rebbe. Loving another Jew has to grip you until the very essence squeezing of your soul. He's saying that we have to, there's a lot in Hasidic thought about loving Jews. Obviously, some Jews are very lovable. And obviously, some Jews are more challenged. And obviously, even the Jews that are very lovable, that doesn't mean we're going to squeeze our very soul in terms of our love of another Jew. And Luther was saying that's how deep it has to go. That's how deep it has to go. I mean, sort of connecting his father, the Alter Rebbe, told the Mittler Rebbe that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidus in general, so this is a Chassidic concept, the Baal Shem Tov said you have to sacrifice. You have to literally be sacrificing for a Jew, including a Jew you don't know, including a Jew across the globe. Now, obviously, when the Baal Shem Tov said this was like, probably the early 1700s. And he's talking about sacrificing for a Jew that you don't know at all. I don't know what his followers thought. Because, well, I don't know. Everyone in the shtetl I've known all my life. And everyone in the shtetl 2 miles away I also know. So what in the world is he talking about, a Jew I never knew? How could I be self-sacrificing for a Jew I never knew? How would I know a Jew I don't know? Like, that's so, I don't even know what that means. Maybe a stranger's going to walk into town? Is that who he means? And then I should be sacrificing for him? Maybe that's what he means. Maybe that's how they interpreted it. For us, it's very real. The world is a very small village. And I think, and so obviously this year, so much has happened. And our hearts have been broken and shattered and seized by Jews we don't know. We've prayed and prayed and prayed for Jews we don't know. And they'll never know we prayed for them. We develop relationships and feelings for Jews that don't know we exist because they don't know us. And we don't know them. But we do, because we're all Jews. When that tragedy that happened this year in Iran with that Jew, Jews all over the world over the world, we're so gripped. What can we do? What can we do spiritually or physically to save this person? You don't know him. You wouldn't recognize him on a street corner. True, so what? So the Baal Shem Tov said, you have to sacrifice. For a Jew, you don't know. We know what that means. And the Mitzvah Rebbe continuing this concept that he heard, this is what he heard from his father. That's a concept from the Baal Shem Tov, from the founder of the Hasidic movement. The Mitzvah Rebbe said this literally has to grip you to the very essence, like squeezing out your soul, your love for another Jew. Sometimes the hardest Jews to love are the ones you know. Sometimes it's easier to be self-sacrificing and spend hours saying Psalms and Tehillim and give lots of charity and do lots of good deeds to save a Jew who's across the world. And the Jews in your own home, those might be the ones that are harder to squeeze and have this love for. But actually it means every single one. The ones that you know very, very well, and therefore that could be the challenge in the relationship. The ones you don't know at all. So why should I care? Because, I don't know, because we're one, because Jews are one, because we care, because that's who we are. And how deeply to care? Squeezing your soul. So it's interesting, I'm thinking, Menucha said in the beginning of class when she was talking about Israel, how she's been to Israel before, but then she was ignorant. And now going, knowing it was such a different trip, I actually remember Chava telling me the same thing in terms of a trip she made to Israel. Very, very similar comment. So think about this idea of loving Jews. Again, it's part of our wiring. It's literally who we are. We are one entity. All Jews literally form one macrocosm body. So we are one. And if you know or if you're completely ignorant, we all have this sort of gut-wrenching love for each other, especially if we don't know you, especially if you're across the world, especially if something horrific is happening. But for many of you, now that you've learned so much more and studied so much more and are so much more understanding of God and of Torah and therefore of the Jew, do you see that love feels different? Or does it feel exactly the same that it felt originally when you were totally ignorant, but still I'm sure had the same love? I don't have the answer. I'm just curious, raising the question. How would you see this in yourself differently? You could think back to in Russia, you didn't know anything. But I'm sure you felt this love for Jews. And now, I'm sure you feel this love for Jews, but you know a lot more. Has it changed? Has it made the feeling deeper or different? Or no, actually not at all.
Okay, I'll speak again.
Thank you, Chava.
I think that, of course, I learned more, and maybe I have different sources of information, but something telling me that because we won, right? We have love for another Jew because it's part of us. I think before we felt the same way, and like when we lived in Soviet Union, we knew about anti-Semitism. Let's say maybe I personally didn't experience the same as somebody else experienced, but I had like a very strong care against anti-Semitism and against whatever very little I knew. I knew very little, but my feeling was very strong, and I was like very happy to meet another Jew, and was very interested in Jews, and was like upset about all the anti-Semitism acts that were happening.
Because it was always completely strong, because it's just the essence core of a Jew is Jews.
Yeah, that's what I think. And I didn't know anything. I basically was raised with like zero knowledge about Jews. That's why I feel strongly this way, because I knew nothing, and I had that feeling. And of course now, like, I'm learning, but I think it comes from the soul, not from the knowledge.
I think that makes perfect sense. And anyone else would agree with Chava and say the same thing? Yeah, that they They see their love now. They know their love. I'm saying for you, it's very clear. You could say Soviet Union now. It's so clear the difference in your awareness of knowledge of what it means to be a Jew and what does it mean God and what does it mean the obligation of a Jew and the purpose of the Jew and why we're in this world and what God wants from us. All that stuff. You didn't know anything. You knew nothing. But you still had such a strong feeling. Like I was saying, it comes from the soul. It's not coming from knowledge. So why would knowledge affect it? Maybe you just show virtually. You can raise your thumbs if your experience was sort of like Chava's, that you would say you had a very strong feeling like in the Soviet Union, and you have a very strong feeling today, and it's about the same feeling. So you don't think the learning in any way changes it. It's just the soul.
I can say about myself that I'm more attuned to the energy. Like I feel so much better when I'm among Jews. And I can feel that my soul is so joyous. Even like to go, sometimes we go to not kosher restaurant just to be with the family, not eating there, but I can feel the difference. And when we go to kosher restaurants and I feel like I'm among my people, it feels different. And especially I was very joyous, of course, in Israel. Still struggling with love every Jew, still struggling with judging people. Like sometimes I'm thinking about the past, how Jews, like the different fractions hated each other, like Hasidic against Litviks and like all the oppositions, and the hatred was very strong. But it's a work in progress for myself.
I think that's like the pendulum, like I was saying before to Chava about if something has so much potential in one direction, it has so much potential in the other direction. The more extreme something is, extremely powerful, in a warped form, it's going to be extremely damaging. And since it's such an extreme power, the forces of evil are really going to try. Not the Mitzler Rebbe who we're discussing tonight, but his great-grandson. The Mitzler Rebbe was the second Rebbe of Chabad. And we're talking, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, the Rebbe Rashab. He wrote an entire discourse about baseless hatred. And he wrote it because there was arguments among people going on then. And that's why he wrote a discourse to respond. And he said, the first temple was destroyed for the hugest transgressions Jews could transgress: idolatry, adultery, and murder. Those are the big three: idolatry, adultery, and murder. And for those three transgressions, the temple was destroyed and the Jews were exiled for 70 years because it took 70 years of exile to remove that spiritual damage. The second temple was not idolatry. There was no idolatry in those days. Was not adultery and was not murder. The second temple was destroyed for baseless hatred. At the time when the Rebbe Rashab, when the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe wrote this, it was 1,800 years after the destruction of the temple. Now we're already 1,900 years after the destruction of the temple. He wrote, it's been 1,800 years and we haven't cleaned this up yet? Meaning the evil of baseless hatred grips us in a way far more than the evil of idolatry, adultery, and murder. Because our unity is so strong, because there's such a power when we're one, because it's such a core soul, as Chava was saying. When you know nothing about Judaism, you don't know what it means to be a Jew, you still love Jews, and don't you dare start up with one of them, even though I could bash my own Jewish contemporaries, compatriots, but don't let anyone else. It's wired in our soul. And yet at the same time, because it's so powerful, there's so many forces of evil that want to destroy exactly that power. And specifically destroy it by creating argumentation and dissension when there could be and should be absolute oneness. It's the most powerful force we have. It says when we're one, God dwells among us. When we're not, God says, I can't be here. Unfortunately, when October 7th came, I don't want to in any way justify it. I'm not justifying it at all. There's no justification here. God, I don't justify it one drop. It was horrible and it was wrong and it was totally not what any of us deserved at all. But at the same time, many people pointed out that it came at a time when there was such intense controversy among the Jewish people in Israel. And of course, the response to October 7th was the greatest unity I've ever seen in my whole life. My whole life. I've never seen the unity that people experienced after October 7th. And it's very extreme in both of its manifestations. So I hear what you're saying, Menucha, and I hear what you're saying, Chava, and I don't think one's more right or one's more wrong. I think actually both are true. What Chava's saying is it's the instinct of my soul. So all my knowledge has got nothing to do with knowledge. It's a separate area. There's an arena of knowledge and there's an arena of soul. And it's my soul response. So if I have knowledge or don't have knowledge, my soul's responding the same way. And that totally, perfectly resonates with me. And what Menucha is saying is, the more I know, the more I appreciate it. The more I know, the more I have a sensitivity to it. And that makes perfect sense to me as well. Just like she said, being in Israel now was a different experience than her previous times. I'm sure her previous times were also very special, but it was a different experience. Her sensitivities are open in a very different way. I could totally see what Chava said. I could totally see what Menucha said. I think they're both 100% resonating as very, very true. I had a lot more prepared, but that's fine. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. I'm so happy we spent this time. Deepest way to connect to the Mittler Rebbe is through his Torah. So we did it. And we should all really be affected by his mazel shining now on his birthday and all of the good that he accomplished in his lifetime, being salvation in the world higher and higher levels than ever before. So we all experience great things over the next 24 or so hours.